Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Are We on the Same Page? I'm your host, Dave Thomas Rocker, and this is my third video in my series on the history of invention. I'm going to have a total of six of these. I'm talking about the greatest inventions of each of six different eras of human history. And today I'm going to count down what I consider the top 10 inventions of the Middle Ages, which I'm defining as being between 500 AD and 1499 AD. So, anyway, let's begin. And before we begin with my list, I want to give a plug for my book, My Spiritual Journey. I wrote this a couple of years ago, came out, I think, mid 2023. And I think it's a really good book. I think you guys would really enjoy it. You can find it on Amazon. It's available both in paperback and in Kindle. I believe it's $30 paperback, $9 Kindle. It's about 100 pages. It's mostly a bunch of one-line quotes about how I think you can live a good life, and it's about the things that I think matter the most in life, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I think guys should check it out. Anyway, that's my plug for my book. Let's continue with today's video. So before I give my list, I think I should give you a little rundown of each of these six historic eras. I've been doing this in each of my videos. And like I said, this is the third in my series of six. So I already did a video on the 10 greatest, what I consider 10 greatest inventions of the Stone Age, which I'm saying is from about 5 million BC to about 10,000 BC. This is before we had human civilization. And then next era I'm calling ancient, which is basically between the invention of agriculture, the beginning of the nomadic revolution around 10,000 BC, to the end of the Roman Empire around 500 AD. I did that list last week. I actually featured 20 inventions from ancient times because there was a lot of great inventions. And by the way, I'm doing 20 on most of these for most of these eras, but I'm only doing 10 today. Today I'm going to do the Middle Ages, also known as the medieval era, from 500 AD to 1499 AD. That's just how I'm defining it. I think most people define the end of the Middle Ages around 1450, but I just decided to use a nice round number, 1499. Why not? And the reason I'm only doing 10 today instead of 20 is because the Middle Ages, as you guys probably know, is also known as the Dark Ages. There really wasn't a lot of innovation at that time. There was no science as we know it. Modern science came later during the Renaissance, and even a lot of the ancient scientists that was known to, like ancient Greece and ancient Rome, a lot of that was lost. So that's kind of the reason it was called the Dark Ages, because a lot of people were in the dark, and a lot of people believed a lot of superstition and a lot of dogma that was promoted by the church, at least in Europe. I think things were a little better in other parts of the world, like in the Middle East, the Persian Empire, and also in India and China. The rest of the world was a lot more advanced than Europe, but that's not usually taught much in Western history. So I think I don't know that much about Asian history or the history of the Middle East. There's probably a lot of stuff I'm missing, a lot of important stuff. And another thing I should mention is that most of the great, or a lot of the great inventions that came from the Middle Ages, they were either invented in other parts of the world, not in Europe. Most of them were invented, I'd say, in Asia or in the Middle East, and they came to Europe later. And a lot of the inventions people think came from Europe during the Middle Ages actually came from ancient times, other parts of the world. They either spread to Europe later, or maybe the Europeans stole this technology. I mean, there was the Crusades. I know that they stole back a lot of the knowledge they lost from a lot of the Aristotle's knowledge they stole back from the Middle East during the Crusades, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the Middle Ages. It was not a good time. Probably my least favorite era that I think I would least like to have lived during the Middle Ages. of all the eras I know. Probably would have even rather been alive during the Stone Age. It was that bad, in my opinion. But anyway, that's what I'm going to feature today. And then I've got three more eras coming up. The Renaissance will be next, and that was, kind of a big, Renaissance means rebirth. That was kind of how we got out of the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, and it was kind of the opposite in a lot of ways. It was a big period of a lot of enlightenment, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great philosophers and scientists, and a lot of moral philosophy, ethics came out of the Renaissance. I think it was a really great era. Also included modern science, a scientific revolution. So that'll be a fun one to do next week. And then we have the Industrial Revolution. I'm defining that as being between 1750 and 1899, and I know, people have kind of a low opinion of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, life wasn't very good, during a lot of that period. I mean, working these horrible factories was not a nice thing. And there was even child labor. And eventually we had to have labor unions and all that, But that didn't really start until the modern era, which I'm saying was between 1900 and I said 2024 here. Right now it's 2025. Happy New Year, you guys. Today's January 5th, so I guess it's already 2025, and I think it's still the modern era. But I made this slide last year or the end of last year, and I'm only going up to 2024. I don't think it's going to make a big difference because I don't think we've invented anything great so far in 2025. I don't have very much faith that 2025 is going to be a really good year. I don't want to get into that, but because of Trump mainly. I mean, I just don't know what's going to happen to the Western world with him as president. I'm not even sure if I want to find out. But I guess we're all in it for better, for worse. But anyway, that's just a rundown of these eras. And like I said, I'm going to feature 20 inventions from each of these eras coming up. But today I'm only going to feature 10. Um, so anyway, let's begin. So according to my list, the 10th greatest invention of the Middle Ages was the paper mill. This was invented around 1050 AD. We don't know exactly when, but most of these inventions we don't know exactly when they came about. But the significance of the paper mill, as I'm sure you guys know, is that it automated the process of paper production. I mean, paper, I think I had paper as the fourth greatest invention of ancient times. And there's no doubt that paper was a really revolutionary invention. I mean, we use paper all over the place. But paper didn't really start becoming practical until we had paper mills. We had, basically machines to make paper. Before that, people were just making paper by hand, which was a very cumbersome and time, you know, um, uh, very slow process. But paper mills is really just a paper factory run by either human power or animal power or water power. I guess the most efficient ones use water power, and there's a picture of a paper mill in the Netherlands, I believe, on the bottom of this slide from dating from 1654. So number 9, the chimney. Um, some beautiful chimneys in Europe, and I think not all houses have chimneys anymore. I mean, chimneys were used in the old days when people had to heat their home with a fireplace, as you probably know. Uh, but we needed chimneys. I mean, the significance of chimneys was they were the first ventilation system in homes, not just homes, but public buildings as well. And I mean, they allowed people to light a fire in their house to keep it warm, and for the smoke to go out of the chimney, as I'm sure you guys all know. And this picture just shows some chimney tops, and I think this is in England, and there's some pretty beautiful chimneys, in a lot of Europe and a lot of other parts of the world as well, even though you don't see so many in the United States anymore. But anyway, that's chimneys. And they were first invented, I think, around 1185. I'm not sure if we know the exact year. But number 8, windmills. I don't think any you can get out windmill was a great invention. I probably should have put this one higher. I'm not sure, but uh, I lived in Holland. I lived in the Netherlands for 4 months back in 1995, and I saw dozens of beautiful windmills from I think the 16th or 17th century. They looked a lot like the ones shown on the left side of this slide. And they used them. They used these old ones for milling grain, I believe, mostly, and they were all over the country. I mean, beautiful buildings, pretty tall too. I think most of these were around 7 or 8 stories tall. They had huge blades, and they got a lot of power from the wind. They were able to use them to mill grain, and of course, now we have these big, huge wind turbines. This picture on the right is a picture of a wind farm in California, very modern one. I think these windmills were probably just built maybe in the last 20, 30 years, but they generate electricity directly from the wind. So the wind blows these turbines, and then the turbines generate electricity. It's a very, it's a clean, renewable source of energy, and we're probably going to see a lot more windmills in the future. So I think the windmill was a really great invention, but it comes from the Middle Ages, and also, I think it came from Asia originally, the Middle East actually, during the ninth century. Came to Europe later. Number seven, the spinning wheel. Here's a picture of an old woman. I think this picture is from the 1890s, by the way. This is an old Irish woman, I believe, spinning yarn. People used to do this in the old days. You've probably seen a lot of movies where you had people, women, making clothes, spinning yarn on a spinning wheel, and that's what people used to do. They used to hand make their own clothes and their own fabrics, and not too many people do this anymore. But the reason I think the spinning wheel was a really great invention, mainly, is because it led to a lot of other, inventions. It basically led to the mass production of textiles, fabrics. And that was part of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, first we have the spinning wheel, which is a hand, operated, device. But then that became spinning jennies, um, and there was also spinning frames. I mean, we had bigger and bigger machines to do all this, textile manufacturing. So that became possible because of the spinning wheel. Anyway, so that's a spinning wheel. And we don't know the exact date when first spinning wheels were made. It was, I think, during the 8th century or sometime around then. Anyway, uh, number six. I really like this one. And this is an invention you don't think about much, but I think we all enjoy this fireworks. I mean, I know I do. I mean, who doesn't like watching the fireworks on the 4th of July? And we have fireworks for a lot of other occasions too. And this picture shows some beautiful fireworks in Paris. This was Bastille Day, which is their Independence Day in France, July 14th, not too far from our own, July 4th. That was the date of the storming of the Bastille during the French Revolution in 1789. I guess they have a big fireworks show commemorating that date. So, uh, but fireworks were invented a long time ago. I think they're much older than most people realize. The first fireworks were made. We don't know the exact date, but around 1100 A.D. and they come from China. And the Chinese actually, the way fireworks were made was originally, I think, even before that. I think it was during the Han Dynasty. Or maybe the Sung Dynasty. I forget which one, but I think it was around 7th century AD. The Chinese discovered that there were certain chemicals that burned different colors when you burned them. So that's kind of the basis for fireworks. You use these different chemical substances, and depending on what chemicals are in them, they burn a different color. That's how you get all these different colors of fireworks. And another invention they kind of rely on, I mean, I guess the first fireworks didn't, but there's aerial fireworks, which is, I think, most of what you see in fireworks shows today. And these rely on rocketry, which is another invention that came from China. around the same time, actually. Rocketry is very old too, at least for launching things like fireworks and artillery, not for launching rockets into space. That came much later with liquid fuel rocket. That was a modern invention, which I guess I'll get to in my last series. But anyway, that's fireworks. Number five. This is a really practical invention to come out of the Middle Ages. Probably one of the most practical ones. I'm using them. You can see I'm wearing some eyeglasses. But eyeglasses came from the Middle Ages. We don't know exactly when the first eyeglasses were made, probably around 1290, and they came from Italy, probably either Pisa or Florence, Italy. And the first person who described the use of lenses for optics was Roger Bacon. He was a very important polymath during the Middle Ages. I think he was English. I'm not sure. There's also Francis Bacon, who I think was kind of came up with a scientific method. That he was much later, I think, early 17th century. But Roger Bacon was pretty great too, and one of the great things he did was to, realize that we could use lenses to see better. So that's why we have eyeglasses. So I'm very grateful for this invention. Number four. Okay, now we're getting into a horrible weapon here, the cannon. And I don't think we can deny that the cannon was a very significant invention. I mean, I'm a pacifist, like I've said before, so I don't care much for weapons technology, and unfortunately, that's the world we live in. We've lived in a world with warfare and violence for most of human history, and maybe it's just part of the human condition. I don't know. I'm hoping there's a day where we won't be fighting wars anymore, at least not, physically violent ones. But for now, we're still stuck with wars and we're stuck with all these horrible weapons. And, probably the most horrible weapon up to modern times was the cannon. And this picture shows this is an illustration of the siege of Orleans during the Hundred Years' War, I believe, 1429. I think that was by the English against France. I believe Joan of Arc was around at that time. Pretty horrible time she got. I'm sure as you guys know, she all got burned in the stake, and she became a martyr for Christianity, and we praise her a lot. But this did happen, and there were some other horrible sieges that were assisted by cannons, including the Mongol invasion of Java. Genghis Khan, he was one of the biggest, um, uh, what do you call it, tyrants of all time. I mean, but we have cannons to thank for a lot of this, and cannons ultimately came from another really horrible invention, gunpowder. And gunpowder wasn't just responsible for cannons, but it was responsible for every form of guns that we have today, including all the handguns and machine guns and rifles and all that other nice stuff and artillery, just about every kind of weapon that's used in modern warfare. That all comes from gunpowder. So I'm not happy with this, but it is what it is, and we can't deny its significance. And number three, I was kind of surprised to learn this. I always thought the magnetic compass was a medieval invention. Actually, it turns out it was an ancient invention. This was an oversight of mine. I learned a long time ago the magnetic compass was invented around. I learned it as around 1180. It turns out it's even older than that. But the first magnetic compasses were used for navigation. That's the key here. The principle behind magnetism. I don't know when magnetism was discovered exactly. But as I think you guys all know, that substances containing iron is what's known as a ferromagnetic material. That means it can be magnetized. That means that you can. I think you can heat it or congeal it. So that all the magnetic moments of the iron atoms all line up, and then it becomes a magnet, a permanent magnet. And the Earth is a magnet. And that's how the magnetic compasses work. They're really just magnets that attract the Earth's magnetic poles. And in the northern hemisphere, it's the north magnetic pole, which is approximately, it's pretty close to the geographic North Pole. That's why people usually say the northern pole of the magnetic compass points north. It's not exactly geographic north. It's usually a few degrees off. That's called magnetic declination. And the reason there's a difference is because the Earth's magnetic North Pole isn't exactly where the Earth's geographic North Pole is, but it's pretty close. And that fact makes magnetic compasses, as I'm sure as you all know, very useful for navigation. I don't know why it was invented in China. So the first magnetic compasses, I think, were actually invented, I think, around the 2nd century BC, a really long time ago. But they were used as stationary. I think they were just used as decorative devices, like the thing shown on this slide. People, I don't know. I don't know why the Chinese didn't think about using it for navigation. Maybe they just weren't interested in that. Just like when the wheel was invented, it wasn't used for transportation for 600 years. It was just used for making pottery at first. So, but someone had the idea around 1040, somewhere between 1040 and 1044 AD, of using a magnetic compass for navigating. And I think this was also done in China. But I think, as you guys all know, that this got spread to the West, and the first big explorers, the first big world explorers, just happened to be Europeans rather than Asians. I'm not sure why that was. I wonder what would have happened if the New World had been discovered by the Asians instead of the Europeans. The world would be a lot different today. Maybe it would have been better because the Native Americans came from Mongolia originally, so it would be like the Asians would have just rediscovered their ancestors here. Then we'd have an Asian New World, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. But that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. But anyway, that's the magnetic compass. And number two, this is one I really like, the mechanical clock. And this was the most accurate timepiece that had been made at the time. I mean, the first mechanical clock was built as early ago as 996 AD. It was built by a pope to be. It was Pope, what's his name? Soon to be Pope Sylvester II. And his wasn't very accurate, but they got perfected. And, there were some beautiful mechanical clocks made during the Middle Ages, including the one shown here. This one was built in 1390. This clock shown here, I think it was an astronomical clock. That's what most of these clocks were during the Middle Ages. They were really into astronomy, on how the heavens moved, how all the planets moved through the heavens, and all that. But this one was from Wells Cathedral. It was originally on the Wells Cathedral in England. It's not there anymore. It got moved off of the church and moved to the London Science Museum, where it still is, and it's still operating. So pretty amazing. And there were some pretty amazing mechanical clocks. I like old European clocks. That's the one thing I really like. I remember seeing some beautiful old clocks in Munich, Germany, little dancing figures that come out every hour. I don't know if those were mechanical clocks, but some pretty amazing clocks came from Europe. I'm going to start with these mechanical clocks, which were pretty accurate. I don't know how accurate exactly, but probably just lost or gained a few minutes a day, I'm imagining. Um, and then the number one invention of the Middle Ages, kind of the one that got us out of it, actually, is the movable type printing press. And we even know who invented it. We don't know the exact year, but the guy who invented the movable type printing press was a German named Johannes Gutenberg. And I think you guys are probably familiar with the Gutenberg Bible. He not only invented the printing press, he even printed the first book. He printed his own version of the Bible, which is called the Gutenberg Bible. He printed it with this machine here. And the reason I think the printing press was the greatest invention in the Middle Ages, probably one of the greatest inventions of all time, is because think about it. I mean, it allowed for mass production of books, of reading material. And what that ultimately did was it made books accessible to common people. Books aren't that expensive, and paper was already widespread use. So all you needed was some paper, and you needed a printing press like this, and then you could mass produce books, printed books, and it allowed for much bigger libraries, and ultimately people were able, just ordinary people were able to read. They couldn't do that before. It increased literacy, so people became a lot smarter because now they were able to read books. So they were able to learn stuff from books. Another thing I learned, I don't think I said this on the slide, but I think another thing the printing press did was that it made society much more humane. I didn't realize this until recently, but I read this in a really excellent book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by very famous sociologist Steven Pinker. One thing he said about the printing press, he did mention the printing press. He said that, like, during the Middle Ages, there was a lot of really, really horrible tortures. I'm sure you guys all know. I mean, there were horrible tortures for heretics in Europe during the Middle Ages. Anybody who was considered, believing anything that contradicted the dogma that was being promoted by the Catholic Church, they were all tortured in just horribly brutal ways. I mean, they'd have their skin burned and branded and whatever. I mean, they'd be, given the wheel. They'd be given all these horrible, just almost unimaginable forms of torture. But I think one thing the printing press did was that once there were books, once people started writing, some people started writing fiction or they started writing accounts of all this horrible stuff that was going on. People could read it firsthand without having to experience it themselves. And then they could see how terrible a lot of that shit that was going on was going. And I think that made people a lot more humane. I think that kind of made it possible for people for the first time in history, maybe, to put themselves in other people's shoes and, realize that they didn't want that happening themselves and they should behave a little bit nicer. So I think the printing press did a lot of that for humanity. So just think about that a little bit. And anyway, that concludes my list on what I consider the top 10 inventions of the Middle Ages. So thank you for watching. Keep thinking, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.